3, 2, 1. This is What's Left America. I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
I'm James Campbell.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is proudly produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends, and hopefully someday, friends just like you. Today on the show, we're going to cover Jeremy Wallace and the Texas Blue Spine.
And some other stuff.
I can't read today. We Will Stay by Hook or Crook. Was It a Tweet? America's fastest growing game show. And Mueller roars. Trump's very, very bad day. And we'll end the show, of course, with Out of Left Field. Now, I sound a little out of sorts today because I've had a cold all week. I got a horrible cough. I'm going to have cough drops in my mouth through the whole show. It gets worse when I laugh, so it's a good thing that I'm on this show.
Should I feel sorry for you? Is that a plea for sympathy or empathy?
I thought you said you just had really terrible diarrhea.
You're about to find out. All right, let's get right into the first topic with that diarrhea there. Let's start. Introduce Jeremy Wallace.
I know he's glad he accepted this invitation.
Jeremy Wallace is staff writer for the Houston Chronicle and has written extensively and wrote a great article about the Texas Blue Spine. The I-35 corridor from Laredo to the Oklahoma border runs through 21 counties. This corridor has been solid red for so long. It's been since the 1980s that a Democrat carried the corridor. John Cornyn won the I-35 corridor by 350,000 votes over his Democratic opponent, David Alamil. Enter Beto O'Rourke, who carried the same counties by more than 440,000 votes. That's nearly 800,000 votes swing in just 4 years. Jeremy, tell us what you found.
Well, it's certainly been an interesting look at the data over a span of past Senate races and governor's races. I thought that Beto would have done pretty well on that corridor, but I had no idea as we started to dig into the data. Not only did he win counties that hadn't been in the Democratic column in a long time, places like Williamson County and Hayes County surrounding Austin, but he did well in places like Collin County, which is just north of Dallas, and has been like a major red area for Republicans. And even in there, it's like O'Rourke didn't win it, but he came darn close. And so I thought, man, we got to start looking into how he did along that entire route. And in pretty much every one of those counties, you see that he either chipped into the margin or flat out won the county. So it was certainly a surprise to me.
And when you look along that whole corridor, what does that say about Texas in general?
Well, and that's what's the interesting part. And this is the problem, going forward for Republican Party candidates as they look to 2020 and beyond. That I-35 corridor is growing, right? That's where the population along I-35 has been, just like in all urban areas, has been growing by leaps and bounds. It's more diverse, it's younger, and so it has all the components that we've seen, at least, theoretically, are places where Democrats do well. But that area is growing, but where the Republicans have been building their victories in the last 20 years in Texas and in North Florida, or in northeast Texas and in the Panhandle, they've seen an erosion. And, as the populations there kind of decrease and the population boom on I-35, you see the problem going forward for Republicans. They're going to have to figure out some sort of way to communicate with voters on the growing I-35 corridor.
Well, Jeremy, this is Chris Bell, and it was a fantastic article, and I would highly recommend it to our listening audience because obviously if Texas flips, it's a whole new day for the Democratic Party nationwide. But I was curious, if you break it down, how much of that area along the corridor is rural?
Well, it's not a lot of rural left, right? It's starting to go away. There certainly are counties, like Medina County is relatively rural outside of, San Antonio, but and so you certainly have some small places. I'm pretty sure the folks in LaSalle County believe they are quite rural, but still, it's still that same trend. What we've seen on I-35 is that as the major metro areas have grown, as the population from those areas are kind of pushed out for whether it be housing or whatever, they're spreading into these places that used to be rural. Williamson and Hayes County have just grown by leaps and bounds. It's the amount of new voters added into Hays County was absolutely insane in the run-up to this election. From March until now, they had an 8% increase in voter population, just voters. That's outrageous compared to the rest of the state. The rest of us saw about a 2% increase per county. But so you can see as those rural areas are just being really influenced by that population growth on I-35 as people move out of those areas. Like even around Waco, you actually saw O'Rourke do better in those areas than I would have ever expected.
Jeremy, this is James Campbell, and I want to echo what Chris said about the reporting. You did some excellent reporting, and I thought that was, as a former Chronicle staffer, I'm glad that they're still doing some good journalism like that, kind of getting into the numbers. My question is, when you look at the map for 2020, and was it the candidate who was really the difference maker, or the issues that made a difference with regard to the demographic change in those areas?
Well, look, it's hard to separate Beto from everything that happened, right? Beto O'Rourke was clearly a very good candidate. Both Republicans and Democrats, see that. It's like he worked that area really well. And one of the pieces of data that you'll see in that story is that in those last 12 days of the election cycle, Beto O'Rourke was on I-35 like 20 or 30 times. Ted Cruz was there 3 times in that same period. And so that work level certainly had a big influence, I think, in making sure he was there. But I do think it goes beyond Beto, because, again, those changes and those population changes and what people who are new to Texas are looking for, or maybe people who are new to, move to Austin or San Antonio or Dallas, whatever they're going, it's like they're bringing something else that we're not used to seeing on I-35. And so I think it is, O'Rourke was a good candidate, but I think he was speaking to the changing nature of what I-35 is. So I think the issues he's talking about, whether like education, healthcare, anything with transportation, those are going to be like the kind of the core issues going forward. And he really hit those really hard up and down I-35.
And is this also the Republicans kind of being asleep at the wheel with respect to the demographic changes that are going on in Texas? I mean, they've been in power for so long. Are they just not paying attention?
Well, yeah, one of my favorite interviews in that story, one of the Republicans I spoke to said this is an absolute bugle call to the Republican Party to kind of wake up. And, while it's been great for them to really focus on those, like, what bathroom bills or, sanctuary bills or whatever else they want to work on, those, that's really appealing to their base, which has always been the way to victory in Texas. But this is different right now. It's like now, it's like Republicans, particularly all those members of Congress along I-35, have had to wake up in a cold sweat, when they saw those numbers and go, oh my gosh, how am I going to win this district the next time? Well, and the big part of that issue is going to be trying to figure out how do you communicate with these people and their lives, the new suburban, urban lives that people are living along, the I-35 corridor. So there is a challenge here for Republicans to figure out how does our conservative brand of politics connect with these voters? And I think from this election cycle, you can see it didn't connect with those voters.
I feel like the Republicans are getting maybe starting to get that message with their choice of speaker. And but my question really is I'm curious about your process. What data did you look at that made this I-35 corridor jump out at you?
Well, I was, look, I lived in Texas back when Ann Richards was winning the governor's race. And I always had in my mind just kind of how she had worked I-35. And so I decided to kind of look back at, all the election cycles. Because, it's funny because the Democrats have had this one kind of playbook out there where it's like, okay, if you do really well on, in the big cities, and then you try to get what you can out of the valley, and then you see how you do, right? And for 20 years, that's pretty much got them nothing.
Right.
And so when I saw the way O'Rourke was looking at things, and I know, he said he didn't have pollsters or consultants or, whatever, but there was something with the amount of tension they were putting on I-35 that made me think, I should probably see, try to see if I look in the numbers and see what they're seeing. And you can see a little of it, during the Hillary Clinton-Donald Trump race. I-35 did start to look a little bit different, certainly compared to past presidential cycles. And so I think the O'Rourke people must have seized upon that and must have realized that, boy, if we really pound, these college towns and these, suburban areas and kind of send our message in there, maybe we have a shot. And again, that stretch, we've just never seen it that close of a race, for Republicans and Democrats until this year, where O'Rourke wins it by unbelievable, like 400,000 votes. It's amazing turnaround from where this, stretch of road was.
Jeremy, I'm sort of fascinated by what you said, that it may go beyond Beto, because what I think a lot of people overlook is the fact that there started to be an uprising on the Democratic side right after Donald Trump was elected. And obviously politics is all about timing, and he was able to take advantage of it and did a fantastic job. But how much do you think it is people reacting to Donald Trump, and how much of it do you think was people reacting to Beto?
Well, there was a huge surge in younger voters, right? And so I think Beto certainly connected with those people. But look what, for younger voters particularly, let's say, people under 35, the amount of turnout, this year was really, I don't have all the data right in front of me, but it was astronomical compared to past years. Normally we see people over 65 hitting the polls, 10 times to every, 3 times for the younger voters, right? But this year, it was kind of more of like a 3-to-1 split from what, I've been seeing in some of the early numbers. We don't have all the data yet because it's all trickling in still. But you can see the younger voters were motivated. And I don't think it was just Beto. It's all the attention on the shooting issues. It's all the stuff coming from the White House and, President Trump. It's the registration efforts that have been going on in Texas, the much more aggressive approach to things. I think there's a lot of things that has kind of, naturally energized people under the age of 30, under the age of 20 even, to want to be involved in this.
Jeremy,
and that's, yeah.
Jeremy, I think that's a great point, and I just wanted to piggyback on that. And I think that strategy played to the millennials, particularly those pop-up get-out-the-vote deals that they were having in Collins, Denton, and McLennan counties. Denton is a college town with the University of North Texas. I thought that was particularly interesting. Could you talk about how that social media strategy played into getting millennials out?
Well, isn't that tell you a big part of the story, right? Because we know people, under the age of 30, just they don't want to, for some reason, read newspapers as much, which is a shame, right? It's a crying shame from a newspaper guy. But they're certainly socially active, in terms of social media. And so, I think O'Rourke was brilliant even when he didn't know he was brilliant, in that, when he was doing all that Facebook Living of everything he went to, all those events, it's like it just spoke to people, especially since he was so authentic when he was doing it. Like that authenticity is what, people are kind of craving in this moment. It's kind of, if you look back in 2016, why did Bernie Sanders go so well? It was kind of like there was an authenticity to him that kind of resonated with younger voters.
It was the wild hair,
particularly.
Right?
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. O'Rourke had a lot of young people working for him. And so if, they're going to say, wait, newspaper, no, let's do this on Facebook Live. Right. I think you get young people working for you, and they're going to point you to what they know, what they know, where the information is. And
Bernie Sanders can't get on a skateboard because he'd break a hip.
That's ageism. We don't do. We're
Jeremy,
too close
to that. But before we wrap this up, I want you to talk about beyond Beto. I mean, along the I-35 corridor, they flipped 12 House seats and 2 or 3 Senate seats in right along that same corridor. Was that Beto or was that talk about that?
Or was it Cruz?
Well, there's no doubt Beto brought a lot of voters that went ahead and did straight ticket. We don't know the data yet. We won't know until probably still a couple weeks away from beginning all that to get all that data. But but you see it time and time again. It wasn't certainly Beto brought a lot of energy in there, but it also showed down ticket. You needed to have there's an energy for some Democratic candidates versus Republican candidates who aren't used to having challenges. If you look at some of the congressional races, people like John Carter, who has been in Congress for I think 20 years at this point, but like he's an older guy. He didn't get out on the campaign trail much, didn't have much in his campaign account, and then he has MJ Heger, who ran this incredible campaign. A former soldier. With all these great TV ads, having this young, family kind of thing that she was putting out front. And so I think, those types of candidates did shockingly well. Like she nearly won a district that nobody thought was, winnable. And so I think, certainly her work set a tone, but I think in places where there were really good candidates, they were able to take advantage of maybe some older Republican candidates who had kind of, almost mailed it in and just assumed that they're always going to win these things.
Right.
If you look up and down the I-35 corridor, there were 5 Republican, candidates who won by 51% of the vote, or with 51% or less. And it's like that's 5 candidates right now. I can tell you will be getting a serious challenge in 2020 as they see this as a sign that hey, maybe these guys aren't ready for. Imagine a whole 2 years with people campaigning and fundraising and building a strategy. Most of these races were surprises, I think, to both Republican and Democrats.
Jeremy?
In Washington or wherever.
Jeremy, just to wrap this up, because obviously the whole country is watching now to see what Beto O'Rourke is going to do. Where is the smart money in Austin right now? You're there. You're part of the press corps. What are folks saying, and what do you all see happening?
Wait, smart money on? Smart money for what?
Whether
What's the
Beto
question?
runs or not.
I got it.
Of course. Yeah, I think at this point, it's hard not to see him trying. I think that there's enough energy out there, and his youth is going to help him, right? If you look at some of the the rest of the Democratic Party, a lot of the candidates that are it's supposed to be the leading candidates going into Iowa, are 60, 70 years old, right? And so Beto already is not only going to have that youth on him. Granted, he lost a race, but he also already has a national fundraising base. Now, I keep telling people, it's like, you don't raise $80 million as a Democrat just in Texas. He built a kind of a network of fundraising that he can go back to, and ask them for more money again, right? In a federal race for the presidency.
But he also spent $20 million to raise the $80 million. So
okay, but doesn't it also seem like his moment is now? And and the Democrats learned a lesson about everybody getting in line and taking a turn.
Don't wait in line, right?
Right. And so if why would he wait and let whoever the next
and that was
person,
pointed out in the New York Times article that politicians don't get better with time, and so this may be the time to strike.
Yeah, it's the tale between Mario Cuomo and Barack Obama, right?
Right.
It's like, you remember back in the day, Mario Cuomo was supposed to be the candidate to run, but he wanted a little bit more time out of New York, right? And so he decided to wait until the next cycle, and the next cycle never came for him. And then you flash forward to Barack Obama, and everybody's saying, "Hey, this is Hillary Clinton's turn," and this is back in 2006, 2007, and he's like, "Well, I'm kind of a hot commodity now. Let's try it.
It's my turn."
Yeah.
And so I think that. If you have, it's just funny. It was from Jeff Rowe, Ted Cruz's, campaign strategist. Said this week, he said, if you have a hot hand, you go with it.
Yep.
And I think it applies to both Republicans and Democrats. And I think particularly with the way that Beto runs a campaign, if he does that in Iowa, New Hampshire, he's going to do well. It's like, I'm not saying he's going to win those things, but he's going to, really put up a good fight. And I don't think he's going to be intimidated by the other candidates out there.
Jeremy Wallace, thank you very much. We'd love to have you back. We'd love to have you back sometime.
All right, thanks. I appreciate it. Really loved it.
All right, great deal. All right, let's move on. That was a good interview. That's the second time you've gotten a good interview for us. So that's 2 things you've done in 7 or 8 months for the show. So, Chris, you're moving along.
You're welcome.
Well, I have the same record with my marriage. Allison says.
Are those your...
I think there's similar statistics there.
Well, so O'Rourke talked to Obama, and I can imagine that's just what he said. Look, dude, it was my time, and I took it, and
don't
maybe...
wait.
I mean,
don't wait.
You can imagine him giving him that...
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting, and I know this isn't a scheduled topic, but I don't... know if you all think that's a good thing or a bad thing, because
We don't stand
Mario
on
Cuomo
formality.
he did wait. I thought that's interesting that you brought that up, because the other example of that is Hillary Clinton. She decided to wait and not take her shot when she was roaring hot, and then waited till 2008, and then along comes Barack Obama, who was
right.
a much hotter prospect. So I don't know. Maybe that is the new rule, and timing is everything. So.
All right, let's go. We will stay by hook or crook. For years, the GOP's been screaming about voter fraud. Trump famously claimed that there was 3 million fraudulent votes cast in 2016. Oddly, the exact number he lost the popular vote by. His voter fraud commission withered and died on the vine without any findings or actually doing anything. Well, we found voter fraud. We found it in North Carolina. It seems that the GOP conspired to steal the 9th Congressional District by faking mail-in votes. So there was voter fraud going on all along. It was just the Republicans that were doing it. Well, who knew? North Carolina's State Board of Elections named a guy named Leslie McCrae Dowless Jr. as a person of interest in connection with an alleged absentee ballot operation in the congressional district. It's just a conspiracy to steal the election. The FBI is now involved. They've named him as a person of interest as well. Who's Dowless, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked, Chris Bell. He's a political operative who worked for the Republican candidate Mark Harris. Not only that, he was convicted in 1992 of insurance fraud and was connected to questionable absentee ballot activity in another election in 2016.
Seems like they're picking on him.
Yep, and Dallas personally turned in 592 of the 1,341 total absentee ballots requested in Baldwin County. There you go.
I wonder, did he get paid per vote?
I don't know. It's crazy. They flat out tried to steal.
Well,
that election.
Texas was famous for mail-in voter fraud, and they finally made it much more difficult to actually qualify as a mail-in voter and who could collect mail-in ballots and all of that. And obviously, I think whoever this individual is probably went to a tutorial in South Texas and found out exactly how you do it and how you really make it work to where you steal the election. But this is extraordinary to see how the candidate who there's no voter fraud, suddenly say, well, I'd be for a new election.
Yeah, I would. Let's just have a new election. No, you're going to get indicted.
Yeah, and this is how it took the election away from a far better, more qualified candidate, I think. And it just kind of goes to Trump always talking about voter fraud. And the Washington Post went back and looked at the election in person and mail-in 2016, December 2016, 4 instances of voter fraud. But it also goes to how the Republicans also, they talk about voter fraud, but they're doing something in terms of changing laws that also give us pause. Because in North Dakota, for instance, I'm still not over how they literally disenfranchise Native Americans from voting in a Senate race. But they're the ones yelling voter fraud. Yep. The Democrats must change their strategy.
And if anybody in the United States ought to be allowed to vote, it ought to be an American Indian.
That's exactly right. but the Democrats are always in a defensive mode on this, in trying to prove a lie, is disprove a lie.
Right. Well,
when they should be thinking about how to strengthen these voting laws to keep these people from being disenfranchised.
Well, first we have to win elections.
Yeah, that's exactly
that's
right.
The point that I've been trying to make for such a long time. If we had not flipped the House, we were going to be in a situation where the Republicans were going to run roughshod over us to the point where we could not win elections because they were going to not strengthen voting rights laws, and they were going to continue to cheat.
Yeah.
So now you're absolutely right. We have some power, and we need to do something about some of these things.
Yeah, but
and state legislatures is where the problem is.
But
This is a state problem.
Yeah.
But one thing that people need to wake up to is that the laws are so extraordinarily antiquated, but we all grew up with them. And so we just accepted that this is the way things are supposed to be. No, they had to be that way because we didn't have the technology that exists today. We didn't have the way to check things the way we can today. And there's absolutely, and everything that was designed to have a very controlled voting base, especially in the South. And so all these restrictions as you have to vote here and now with all this voter ID and all this ridiculous crap that they've thrown out, all of this needs to go out the window. And I mean, Democrats need to become the party that's going to be fighting for that every step of the way. There should be everyone should be allowed to vote when they become 18. All these registration restrictions and everything, it's absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
We need to be. If we're going to be this great democracy and the beacon for the rest of the world, we need to start signaling that.
It's really simple to fix all this. When you turn 18, you issue a voter registration card with your picture on it. Here you go, buddy. Go vote.
Well, because you're a citizen.
It's done.
But why?
Yeah.
But why should you have to go through an extra step to register? It makes no sense. If you're a citizen
That's what I'm talking
of the United States, boom, go.
They already know who you are.
But I agree with that. But I think they could also, we need to start thinking more creatively about how we conduct our elections. And by that, they have voting holidays in other countries where they get people to go out and vote en masse, and it's almost, it feels like an obligation.
I wonder why the Republicans wouldn't be in favor of that.
Well, here's the thing. The Democrats,
that might get
the Democrats for years, Chris, made it possible they fought for equal rights and African Americans voting, and it was a reason why Texas was under the Justice Department's eye for years, and they wouldn't clear.
But if you had a voting holiday, who would be off to go vote?
The workers.
That's right.
Unite.
Well, no, Chris, you make it a law. And
but I don't think Chris is arguing against it.
No, I'm in favor of it. I'm just making a point as to why the Republicans would not be in favor of it.
But you know what? Look, I feel like Chris Bell is talking about technology giving us the ability to do some of these more interesting, creative ways to get more people able to vote. But some part of me also feels like we should just do this thing that they do in Afghanistan where you get a purple finger, and then it shows you voted and you can't go vote again. Yeah. And, we need to...
sort of like Catholics.
But I mean, the difference being if they don't, then they chop the finger off.
Right.
I mean, so I don't think we need to go that far.
Right.
But I do think that this is incredibly important moving forward because we've seen it with early vote here in Texas where people can go wherever they want to cast their vote. It's absolutely no problem. And so all these other things that are thrown out, and as Chris was pointing out earlier, very limited voter fraud.
Yeah.
Look, if Walmart can stay open 24 hours a day, then voters ought to be able to go in and vote for 24 during a 24-hour period. We've got a situation where the people at the lowest end of the workforce, the people with the fewest options, have the hardest time because they have split schedules and they don't know what their schedule is going to be, and then maybe they're
and there may not be a place close to them,
overnight shift, and they sleep during the day, but they've got to get dinner on the table some kind of way for their kids. I can buy gas any time of day or night, and somehow they know that it's me, and they take the money from the right account. People should be able to vote in the same way.
And I love Election Day, and so I returned to that this year because I knew I was going to be in town. It was going to be fine, and so I went Election Day. But sure enough, the guy in front of me, he was at the wrong precinct.
Wow.
He's shown up at 7 in the he stood in a little line. It wasn't a big line because it was really early. But sure enough, being told, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can't vote here." So, I mean, this is just absolutely ridiculous. It needs to change.
Right. All right, let's talk about one more thing in this topic before we leave. In Wisconsin, the Republicans who controlled the state for the past 8 years are, to put it lightly, I guess, butthurt if they're lost. Robin Vos, the Republican Speaker of the Assembly, was defiant. We're not going to stand like bedrock, and we're going to stand like bedrock and guarantee for crying out loud. We're going to stand like bedrock.
Could you blow your nose one more time?
To guarantee that Wisconsin does not go back, Vos told local Republican reporters after the midterms. Vos and outgoing Governor Scott Walker conspired to put together a lame duck legislative session designed to severely limit the incoming Democratic governor and Democratic attorney general. Here's what they're going to do: limit early voting, which benefits Democrats. Lawmakers, not the governor, control the majority of the appointments. Legislation would also prevent Democratic Evers from banning guns in the Wisconsin Capitol. Evers would have to get permission from lawmakers to seek adjustments on programs that run jointly by federal and state governments, such as benefit programs. Block Evers' ability to withdraw from state from lawsuits challenging the Affordable Care Act. And at the last minute, the senators confirmed 82 last-minute appointments of walkers.
Well, Tony Evers is one of my favorite politicians in America. If you look at him, you'll see why. He has white hair and he wears big glasses. So,
And plaid jackets.
And plaid jackets.
I don't think he wears any plaid. I don't think there's any plaid in that man's wardrobe. But as Andy has pointed out on this show many times, the Republicans are motherfuckers. And I mean, they will fight to the bone. And so this is just
And
really.
by motherfucker, I mean sore loser.
Yeah.
So, exactly.
And
but
other really horrible
But it's
things.
incredible the
Yeah,
lengths
it
they
is.
go
It
when
is.
everybody knows what
Shameless.
they're doing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Shameless, yeah.
And so here we go again. And actually the things they're proposing, I don't know. I don't know Wisconsin politics that well, but it seems like
just
in
galls
the end
me.
it might be kind of meaningless. But really, just to demonstrate to the nation, we are really, really desperate here.
You
Yeah.
know, but we have an example in the White House of how you can be successful moving the goalposts. If something doesn't go your way, you just change the rule after the fact to your benefit. And the president has had a lot of success doing that. And so other people, we talk all the time now about it has emboldened the Republicans to do X,
That's
Y, or
exactly
Z.
right.
And it is always something awful.
Yes.
What these guys have forgotten is there's going to be another election in Wisconsin, and what they're doing is they're just driving those nails in. And there's a reason why these Democrats won. And if they keep doing this stuff, they're just going to keep getting voted out of office.
Well, I know that's what we keep hoping. My fear is that you do enough to the point where you can't undo what's
Well,
and
that's
that is what they're
that's
trying
a fear
to do.
nationwide.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
they're trying to do the same model where you just change enough things to take away the power.
Take away the power. Yeah. So
All right, let's move on. It's time for Was It a Tweet? America's favorite new, fastest growing game show. Y'all are going to play. I'm going to read off a tweet. You will decide if it's a real tweet or did I just come out of my head.
Can I ask
Did
a
just
question?
What?
how can it be America's favorite when this is the first time we've played?
No, we
No,
played.
we played
We
it.
played when
Did
you
we?
weren't
You
here.
just took the week
Where was
off.
I?
You took the week off. You
I
came
thought we
in.
all took the week off. You guys told me we weren't.
But you took 2 weeks
You
off.
took 2 weeks off. It's
Oh,
the week you came in with a
gotcha.
hangover and went home.
No, I was very, very
Biracial privilege.
not hungover ill.
So James, will you keep tally?
I got it.
James is 1-0. James won last time. Won a
Okay.
big beautiful prize.
Yes.
Oh, was it like a Trump prize? A big, beautiful,
Big beautiful prize.
big, beautiful prize.
So James will keep the tally. So I'll read the tweet, and Andy, this goes back to the very beginning of tweetdom, so it can be all the way back.
And you can't
to-
look at his
You
screen.
cannot look at my screen.
Okay.
There's no cheating. All right, here's number one.
Stop.
Don't look over here. Here's number one. Mitt
Oh,
Romney.
you can see me do that?
Yeah, Mitt Romney had his chance to beat a failed president, but he choked like a dog. Now he calls me racist, but I am the least racist person there is.
Tweet.
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 That was a tweet.
Okay.
Do we always go in the same
We're all
order?
It
tied.
doesn't matter.
No,
Yeah, you
Chime in.
Just chime in whenever.
we
you
don't
want.
really have any rules on this
Yeah.
Okay, we're
podcast.
just,
Yeah.
No rules
Obviously.
at all.
Number two.
We
Number
just-
two. We pause today to remember the brave American heroes who selflessly gave their lives at Pearl Harbor, and we know that Europe must pay its share to NATO.
is this?
Let me try that
Are
again.
these tweets supposed to come from Trump?
Yeah,
Yes.
these are all Trump tweets.
Oh, okay. Well, that one definitely was not. You don't even have to read that one again.
All right.
Not a tweet.
Not a tweet.
I said it was a tweet.
Not a tweet.
It was not a tweet.
Oh, okay. Did you say it was or wasn't?
Not.
Okay, you lose.
Wait, what?
And Andrea and I, or
We get a
Andy and I are in the
All right.
Watch
lead.
his point. Maybe he won because
No.
he didn't
No.
take
No,
points.
it was
He didn't-
correct. Right, last time
Okay.
was correct.
It was not
Okay.
a tweet.
It was not a tweet. All right.
I'm just talking
Number
about
3.
the point taker,
Even though every poll time.
scorekeeper.
Have you ever played a game
I'm
at
using
your
a
home?
Republican counting system.
All right.
Okay, that's
I
what
would
I'm
hate to
afraid
play
of.
Monopoly with you. Come on, let's
I'm
go.
trying. If y'all stop talking. Even though every poll, time, Drudge, etc., has me winning the debate by a lot, at Fox News only puts negative people on, biased, a total joke.
Tweet.
Not a tweet.
Tweet.
It was a tweet.
Yay!
I am winning.
Yeah, I know.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
This
Number
may be
4.
the tiebreaker.
Chris-
Andy's
Chris-
way in the lead.
Chris Bell's not used to biracial women winning.
Bill and
Number-
I are tied.
Biracial
you are
privilege.
ahead by 1.
Number 4. A big fat hit job on at O'Reilly Factor tonight. A total waste of time to watch. Boring and biased. At Britt Hume said I would never run. A dope.
Tweet.
Tweet.
Not a tweet.
It was a tweet.
Oh. All
I
right.
think. Do we have any more?
Yeah, there's one more. That was just number 4.
So you have to read through all this shit.
Yeah.
Well, how else are we gonna know? Like, oh, well,
The
we
only
stop.
problem
You
is,
have
is
to
when I
go
have to
back.
make up the
You
fake
have-
ones.
you have-
Because when I have to make up the fake ones, I have to think like Donald Trump. And it
Critical,
gives me
you're
a
too
headache.
smart. You're too smart to make up
Number
a
5.
fake tweet.
When I owned Miss Universe pageant, we had the best looking women and better ratings. Bring back swimsuits.
Oh, that's a tweet.
Tweet.
Not a tweet.
It was not a tweet.
Yay! That was very good.
That
you.
was good.
Thank you.
I swear I read that.
All right.
I want to
That
check
was
that
fantastic. You could be a speechwriter.
All right.
She won. Bill and I tied.
All right. Andy wins the big prize. What did she win, Chris Bell?
Not a damn thing.
All right.
I don't know. We can just find something around here that we can give her.
Oh, he got a big, beautiful prize, and I get some fine.
You'll get exactly
well, I
the
will,
same. You'll
I'll
get exactly,
choose. I'll look around the office.
He
and
got like
choose.
an old.
you'll
He
get
got
it.
an old
Well,
CD.
that John Denver CD is still available.
That's right.
I already have it.
We never.
I already took it.
Oh, you took it?
I already took it.
What? Were you drunk? when you took
No,
that?
Rick Mitchell gave it to me.
Oh, and you accepted it.
I accepted it.
That's when you should have just crushed it right in front of it.
All right. Let's move on.
I'll take money. I choose money.
Money.
Oh, the funniest. Okay, this is a family joke with us. We like to watch these. What's that show where oh God, where you little videos that people send in.
America's Home Video, funniest home videos.
And this little girl gets
You
up.
watch that show
I watch it with my
with
kids.
Bob Saget?
Say yes, him.
Man,
I watched it with my kids, and it was very funny in the right frame of mind.
After a few drinks.
Just whatever the frame of mind
With
might
the
be.
kids, too.
With the kids.
Okay.
And the little girl
What's
gets
their
up
favorite?
and she says her Bible verse. And then the next little boy comes up and he says, I did not remember my verse, but I would like my candy anyway. So
Was that Bell's kid?
I liked that show until I found out that Bob Saget had been a very pornographic comedian prior to taking on that role as like
And his back is
Mr.
a-
House of what was
It
that?
paid the bills. Full House.
Full House.
Yeah.
And then he had
then he
the
had that.
funniest home videos,
He
and he
did
just
not-
always acted like
a goody
the-
two shoes.
Oh,
like,
my
doing that.
goodness.
But he did not like that role because he was so constrained in it. But he kept coming back year after year because it,
Made millions.
got paid.
he paid the bills.
Made millions.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Let's
Was
move
that
on.
not a topic for today, Bob Saget?
I think it was.
It is now.
I don't know. I really don't
See,
know
I
what
think
the
we might have
tie-in-
to be more spontaneous.
Are y'all ready?
Yes,
Yeah.
this sounds
All right.
like a morning show.
When this goes,
Anyway.
when this
What?
goes over an hour, I don't want to hear any griping.
Okay, go ahead.
We don't
Fire
have
away.
another topic, do we?
Yes.
Lead us to the next topic.
I thought we were done.
Lead us.
Mueller
Many of our listeners are done.
Mueller
All
roars.
5 of them.
If you'd have read the outline I sent you, you'd have known we had another.
Oh, I'm sure
memorize
she
it.
read it.
Mueller
She
roars
knows she did.
Trump's very, very bad day. In sentencing memos on the upcoming sentencing of both Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort, Special Counsel Robert Mueller and the Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office, gave the best insight as to what has been collected so far, and it does not look good for the Donald. He calls it collusion. The United States Code calls it a conspiracy. Try as he may to deny it, Mueller is signaling that he has evidence, and it's coming that the president is involved.
So,
Chris, can you just share what you were sharing earlier about Roger Stone? I think that would help kind of set.
So I saw an interview today that someone asked Roger Stone why the president was on such a tweet storm yesterday. He sent out about 25 tweets about this yesterday, and Roger Stone said, because it's finally dawned on him that this is all about him.
Yeah. But the tweet that it totally clears him was like totally Donald Trump narcissistic form, because what it didn't do was clear Donald Jr. And he's the one that should be like real concerned about this now.
It didn't clear anybody, and it directly tied the president of the United States in a conspiracy with
yes, he's an unindicted co-conspirator, but this is the thing: the payoff is not going to come now. It may come when he's out of office, because the Justice Department is not going to indict him. Okay, because they have a policy not to indict.
Well, yeah, I
And the
get
Senate's
that.
not going to.
But Donald Jr. should absolutely be worried now.
But okay, I don't get credit for this. Somebody else said it, but I think about it every time I hear Don Jr.'s name in relationship to this situation. Donald Trump is going to cut off Donald Jr. like a starfish, extra arm of a starfish. He's gonna just.
If you
throw
could
his-
remember a
You missed-
punchline, it would be
I'd
so
I'd be
fantastic.
devastating. But you get the picture. Starfish, and then there's an arm. He cuts it off. And that arm that gets cut off.
If you just
that's
write the
Don
punchline-
Jr.
But it's
Write
a
the
good
punchlines down.
Hey, Andy, it's a good week not to remember. I mean, apparently George Bush, who we just was remembered so fondly, he loved jokes. He could never remember a punchline.
And we all love George Bush Sr. this week.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
he
so-
could never remember a punchline.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, here's another.
So
here's
that
another
was a
one.
beautiful
And I
way
think
to
I
honor him.
I think I do remember this one. So I keep hearing about how
mean.
Mueller is playing. God, would you guys stop fighting? I keep hearing about how Mueller is playing three-dimensional chess,
want you to expose
and
our
Trump is
relationship.
playing
Just talk to me.
checkers.
Stop it.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Usually that's all I'm doing
That's
anyway.
right.
Mueller's playing three-dimensional chess, and Trump is playing
Checkers.
But somebody said that Trump is playing crazy eights.
What kills me about this is the president really thinks, and I think Donald Trump really thinks, that he can just stand in front of a microphone or tweet something out to change the topic, and it goes away, and it's over.
Well, it does.
And you can't.
But
and,
no, you can't. You're not supposed to be able to, but it does. He directs he's the topic of the day.
So-
he directs the news coverage.
But
now,
Well, can we talk about that?
hang on a minute. Let me finish my point. I mean,
It wasn't a very good
you don't
one.
mind? No,
But
no.
anyway.
Hang on. He may change momentarily what we're talking about, but the investigation does not change because the president says, "I'm firing my chief of staff."
Well, thank
the
goodness.
investigation didn't go away.
Right,
yeah,
but
we're lucky that we have Mueller
What was
in
the
that
What was the
regard.
name of the
Okay.
senator from Minnesota that had to resign? The Democrat. Franken said. Al Franken said, it was beautiful. Al Franken said, if you could just change a conspiracy to, if you could change a conspiracy to not a crime by calling it collusion, all a defense attorney would ever need was a thesaurus. and it's so right. It doesn't
Miss Al
change
Franken.
anything.
Okay,
But hold on. So all of this is beginning to make sense because we've been doing this show for, several months now. We talked about the summit when Trump went to Russia, but we get so distracted because it's like this barrage of information and stories and all this stuff, and you forget what happened last
weeks
week
ago.
or yesterday, and we went on and on here about that
What's your
shit
point?
show with Vladimir Putin. And so now you pretty much have a pretty clear indication of what all was going on.
Right.
And
Right. Well,
Well, you can jump in too instead of just giving me hand signals.
I'm just like trying to get you to
what's going to
the
happen?
point.
Look,
Wait.
yesterday the president tried to change the topic by announcing that Kelly was leaving, and it didn't work. Well, actually, the news media just fine.
Well, who
And they moved on.
cares? He's
Right.
already said he has no
But
influence
this
whatsoever.
week, you watch this week. We're taping on Sunday. This week, he's going to fire Kirsten Nielsen.
I was going to say Gillibrand.
Kirsten Nielsen.
yes.
He's going to
Who's
fire her
that?
this week. She's the
the
head of Homeland Security,
INS.
INS. He's going to fire her this week. Try to
Who
check it
cares?
again because
No,
he's going to
well-
try to change the subject again.
Well, that's all well and good. What I'm more
Well, he
afraid
tried
of.
to do that with Barr and the woman that was a reporter
I know.
that he appointed as a UN envoy.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
like
yes.
ridiculous.
So he's trying to change the subject. He's trying to change the subject. He's trying to change the subject, and it has been working for him all this time. Correct? You are correct, Chris Tritico. The investigation moves on, right? But what I'm afraid of now is that we have been waiting for so long for this report, for some indictments, for some that Trump is already saying, "Hey, I was running a business. I didn't think I was going to be elected."
No.
What's the
Yes.
problem? He is moving the goalpost
That's
again.
exactly
You
right.
can't-
And we've dragged this thing out so long. We've waited for Miller. We're
He lied about
it so
distracted.
many
We're
times,
so
though.
ADD that now it's at the point where I think the American people feel like, oh, I'm so bored with this. Let's just go ahead and finish this presidential term and move on. Like
All
we
of
don't
that.
even. we're
See,
not even-
I'm with you because
Except-
I don't, and I have no desire for impeachment whatsoever. I think putting Mike Pence in there would be an absolute nightmare. And
Yeah, there was
I
never a
wasn't-
good.
I never was in favor of impeachment, but this investigation hasn't taken any longer than any other federal investigation I've ever worked on.
I'm not complaining about the length of the investigation. I'm just saying that when I read the lead story in the New York Times about, what do we know now about, this investigation based on the reports that Mueller has, the indictment, the lawyers help me out with
sentencing,
the brief.
sentencing
the
memos.
The sentencing-
pre-sentence
yes.
papers
Sentencing
very,
memos.
very
So,
difficult.
heavily
to
redacted,
understand.
but we've learned this and that. I just think that the American public is rather bored with that and wants some action by Congress that is going to improve their lives, and they're just sick to
But
death
Andy,
of this
they're
whole.
bored
and
with
I am
it.
not
They're
making.
bored
So-
with it because of the way we live today. Because all the
Yeah, good
shit
point.
they create on a day to day.
We have short attention
Basically,
spans.
it's hard to keep up.
But
it
you know what,
really
but
is very, very hard
It
to
is
keep
hard
up.
to keep up. But you know what? You know what is easy to keep your eye on? The fact that you can't pay your bills, the fact that you don't have health insurance, the fact that your student loan debt is not going away, the fact that you can't afford
which is
to-
why
to
the
buy a
Republicans
house.
got shellacked
And
in the last
yes.
election.
Yep,
And so,
so-
I'm not arguing that there should not be investigations. There should be. Mueller should, complete his investigation. The various Democratic-led House investigative panels should do their work. But at the same time, we need to be passing legislation that will improve people's lives.
I absolutely agree with that. But Crisco, I think one of the things that really makes me really happy when I talk to my GOP friends is the fact that they always dismissed all of this because the economy was doing well, the stock market was roaring,
Which is all coming home to roost.
And now that the tariffs, that discussion that Trump was faking everybody out with, the stock market is like plummeting.
Right.
Trump is basically feeling that pressure from, because the economy is like turning around. That was the argument the whole time. Leave
Don't
them
worry about
alone.
that, 'cause-
The economy's great. Everything's fine. Well, that was a house of cards
Right.
that was eventually going to
But-
come
And
down.
what's such a shame is all of the news about this investigation shielded the biggest story of the week last week, which was the report that Donald Trump has been saying, I don't give a damn about this debt I'm building up because I'll be out of office when it comes crashing down.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest story of the week, and it just got glossed over.
But you know what? That's not to me. that is a Republican MO.
But he said it out loud.
But Republicans always raise the debt, and the Democrats get blamed for it.
But
so that's always been the way it worked. But from an attorney's perspective, I just like to hear you guys talk about the way Mueller has been methodically building a case against him. And, they don't know what's coming. They're trying to say, speed it up. But Mueller has something.
That's what's been the brilliance of this whole thing is as opposed to Ken Starr, he's kept all of his cards close. And you watch how Trump has been changing his story all along, because every time a little nugget comes out, Trump realizes he's backed himself into a corner, so he changes his story. But when we finally get all of the cards out on the table, you're going to realize that Mueller has boxed him into a corner that he can't get out of.
Yeah.
That's what he's been doing all along.
Yeah. And, of course, he answered his own questions. He didn't have an attorney helping him with that.
That's a lie. All right,
But
we gotta go.
but what I think is fascinating, though, I'm sorry, but so you look back on Watergate, and that's NPR and others are comparing everything to Watergate, and they should. But nobody wanted to believe, and when Richard Nixon did what he did, that a president of the United States would actually engage in any of this conduct. And so that's kind of where we are with a big segment of America. We have a much easier time believing about Donald Trump than we would have back in with Richard Nixon.
Right.
But it is people just don't want to think that someone running for president would collude
with our biggest adversary. Right.
But this is not my original thought either. But Chris makes a good point about Nixon.
I thought mine was
I know.
original
So when you
thought.
said original, did you mean?
But someone made a good point on MSNBC today. I forget who it was. They talked about Nixon being a former senator, him being in the military, and really caring about the institutions to the point that he decided to resign.
That's not why he resigned.
Donald Trump, but no, what he did not want was a messy fight over
Oh, come on. Richard Nixon didn't resign for the good of the country. He resigned because they finally convinced him he was going to get removed.
Yes.
He was going to do the same thing that Trump was going to do, start pardoning people, pardoning the burglars.
But I don't think that Trump cares about the institutions.
Oh, there's no question about that.
Oh, no. We won't disagree with you there.
We've seen how he's tried to dismantle the intelligence
But let's don't prop Richard Nixon up for doing anything for the good of the country.
What I'm saying is that at least he had some understanding of our institutions.
I agree with James Campbell.
Donald Trump has no respect for that
I
at
agree.
all.
We are in a time where Andrew Johnson looks like a decent president. Teapot Dome. Why did we even care about that?
Let's go to out of left field. Who wants to go first?
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and go first.
Right, since you keep skipping school anyway, you have to go first now.
I don't know why we have to throw all that
A bit of shade on the sister.
Just mean and nasty while I find my notes. Okay, so I was listening to George W. Bush eulogize his dad. It was very moving. And he said this one thing it's a very short little part. He says, "Of course, Dad taught me another special lesson. He showed me what it means to be a president who serves with integrity, leads with courage, and acts with love in his heart for the citizens of our country. When the history books are written, they will say that George H.W. Bush was a great president of the United States, a diplomat of unmatched skill, a commander-in-chief of formidable accomplishment, and a gentleman who executed the duties of his office with dignity and honor." He didn't have, no camera had to cut to Trump sitting there in the audience. Nobody had to, point it out. No one had to remark on it. It was so obvious that he could say these things about his father and think what you want about George H.W. Bush. All of those things none of those things can be said about our current president.
Can I go next? Because I had a lot of thoughts
and
about...
I'm finished.
I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
I was, but it was
I've thought a
impossible
lot
for me to know
about
that.
this because
So you're going to give us your Bobby Kennedy.
No.
No,
But
go.
I
I want to hear what Yeah.
My mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1989, I believe. And then in 1992, in order to get elected, George Bush came out against stem cell research. And at that point, stem cell research was the only thing that offered any hope for victims of Parkinson's disease. And I'm like, here are the founders of Planned Parenthood in the city of Houston taking this stand. I knew it wasn't in his heart. I knew that's not what he really wanted to do. I knew it was just what he had to do in order to get elected. And so I was incredibly against him. I mean, because of that, because it's such a personal issue to me and because of what it influenced my family. But then as time went on and he moved back here and watched him, met his son when I was in Congress, and good guy, even though we're on different sides of the street politically. And the I thought it was striking this week how much bipartisan support came out for him, because, and if anybody really wants to know the full story, there's a book, and I was fascinated by it years ago because a guy named Richard Ben Kramer died, and they said he was a reporter for the Rolling Stone, but he had written one of the greatest political books ever, and I had never heard of it. And I read a lot of political books, so I went and got it. It's called What It Takes, and it's all about the 1988 election. And there are extraordinary chapters about every candidate in that race, but one that really grabbed me was about George Bush. And it's extraordinary about Texas. It's extraordinary about him because so much in this day and age gets relegated to a paragraph or sentence in any kind of biography or any kind of news story. But there were so many things in George Bush's life that were so incredibly real and really extraordinary. Really, really extraordinary. And you're like, man, you have a much deeper understanding of the man, a much deeper understanding of his family. And rest in peace, George Bush. You were a hell of a man.
Next week we can talk about some of those.
That was
things
really
that we
cool.
don't
That was really cool, Chris.
care as
Does
much
the
about.
statute of limitations, run out at like 1.5 minutes on
on what's out of left field or
what's out of
whatever.
left field?
No, because you would
He
be.
passed the
We would have to
point
cut
of
you off every week.
profound
But
at
you're-
1.5 minutes.
But your 30 seconds started when you started talking. So
Well, no, it's going to be quick. And I'm going to.
Well, but he said-
I've been quick some days.
That's what Allison said. I cannot believe I am saying this. You guys are infecting me with your poetic.
Allison said the very same thing to me about him.
Okay, go.
Go.
I can't go.
Tritico, say something profound. Clean up this mess.
all right, my out of left field is also about George Bush, George H.W. Bush. I've been a political animal my entire life. I followed politics from high school. I got a degree in political science from the best university in Texas that we've all agreed is Sam Houston State University, of course. And
Why you never went into politics?
yeah, no. And I've always always followed it. And I thought that George Bush, and I wrote a piece on this the day he died, and there was things that I didn't agree with about his presidency, but those things have all been replaced for me by the grace, style, and dignity with which he not only carried himself as a president, but his post-presidency. George Bush was a man of integrity and dignity and style. And what I saw in the man, the way he raised his family and the way he believed in family and the way he believed in the presidency was the way that this country should be run. I heard a story after he died that on the night before he debated Bill Clinton, one of his granddaughters lost her teddy bear. And so instead of preparing for the debate, he spent an hour and a half with his granddaughter looking for the teddy bear and took a break in preparing for the debate because it was more important to help the granddaughter find the teddy bear. That takes a lot for somebody who wants to be the president, remain the president of the United States. And I thought that was a great story. And that's why the outpouring of love and affection for the Bush family was the way it was. George Bush was a man of style, grace, and dignity. We could use more of that in this country. That's my left field.
I absolutely agree, and I just want to piggyback on everybody in talking about enlightened leadership. It was said that Houston slept through the civil rights movement because we desegregated the downtown lunch counters, and George Bush in Texas was a part of that enlightened leadership. And so I think that the country saw the contrast between what's in office now and George Bush, and I hope the Republican Party can bring the pendulum back to the middle and start thinking like with the integrity that George Bush had. And that's my out of left field.
And if I could just follow on that, James, if you go to the George Bush Library, you will see this extraordinary article, and there's been a lot of commentary about it this week. But there's the story about him voting for the Civil Rights Bill and knowing that the angst he would face the anger he would face when he came back to Houston, and going to an actual town hall meeting and facing the whole crowd and actually discussing with them why he had done it, and people walking away where they could say, okay, I understand it. And that's the kind of profile and courage we really don't see anymore in this day and age. Instead, people like Ted Cruz just run away from town hall meetings and won't face people and try to explain why they've done what they've done. And usually, well, maybe not anymore. Maybe you can't explain anymore. And that's really sad.
And that concludes what's left in the GOP.
All right, that's all the time we have this week for What's Left America. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, but more than that, what do we need to do, Andy? Subscribe to What's Left America. Go to Libsyn or your favorite podcasting site and subscribe to What's Left America. Much thanks to Vertical Ascension Entertainment for recording us and putting us on YouTube, and to Keegan DeLeo, our in-studio producer. That's all the time we have this week. Have a great week.
And in our bonus segment, we can talk about